my tech feature was big data, and big data is essentially like large, like big sets of data that is discovered and kind of brought to fruition by companies and different applications I'm going to talk about, and they use it to further company or to learn more about maybe who, how are people using their products or what they're doing on them. So the history, so the idea was first came around in like the 60s when people first started collecting large amounts of data, but it was mostly when companies like YouTube and Facebook around like 2005, when they started to emerge because they realized how much data their like companies are actually generating. And companies like Hadoop or Hadoop, they're like companies that allow you to collect and store and analyze all this amount, like all these amounts of data. So again, kind of getting more into it, other creations that caused big data to kind of become more popular and used was cell phones, Internet of Things, and cloud computing. So three major aspects of big data are volume, variety, and velocity. I'm going to go talk more about them. So volume kind of just looks at like the scale of it, and the important thing to notice about this is that a lot of these companies, you collect all of this information, but you need to figure out and kind of decide what's important and what you're going to do with that. So if you're collecting like terabytes of information, you have all this stuff, but you need to like actually filter out what's important. Velocity is the rate that the data is being collected and processed, and just for some like facts to show like how much information's out there, like there's 7 billion Google searches a day and 400 Amazon transactions in a second, and if you're these companies, you have to be prepared to deal with this effectively. And variety just refers to the two major types of data, and structure is more so kind of like numeric information and stuff you can kind of put into like a table or like it's some form like a graph, and you can kind of evaluate and look at all this information, whereas unstructured is something that's kind of more nuanced and like just like letters and stuff, and you can't really like group it together just as well. So other important aspects of big data is veracity and value. So value is like what you can actually do with this information and like why it's important, and veracity is how reliable it is, and stuff like in the last election with like fake news and stuff, things like veracity is very important because it's a lot easier to kind of conjure up information. So applications of big data could be for like from a company's perspective, could be tracking like consumer behavior on websites. So for example, Amazon is looking at how much time people are spending on certain web pages and what web pages you visited before buying another product. And kind of going more into this, it's known as like collaborative filtering, and they also use this to kind of, when you buy one product, recommend other products. And that's like another reason why they have like memberships, because they can like then look at all the stuff you're buying. Other, from like a government perspective, stuff like with first responders and like natural disasters. I feel like weather is a big one. That's a huge one, like using satellites to look at weather patterns, and if you ever watch like the news, just whenever they use to predict like hurricanes, and they can see where it's at and stuff, and that's like a huge kind of application of that. Fraud detection. We kind of like talked about like the cybersecurity today, but people can now use information to track consistencies in how people are committing cybercrime. So that's kind of how they use it in their advantage. Data visualization, this looks at how people analyze information. So once you have all this stuff and all this data, you need to be able to actually use it effectively. So data visualization just looks at creating kind of like a graph to map out all this stuff, whether it be numbers or other things. And the whole point is to find consistencies and patterns in like how people and how the data works. So So I use this just to kind of get like an idea of how everything works. Like the first, like big data is kind of just all this information and just shows all the colors kind of intertwined and intermingled. And the analytics goes into sorting out and figuring out what you can do with this. And then the decisions is once you get all of that, kind of sorting it and officially like kind of acting upon it. And this is another example, like a data visualization. So I think this is races over like an area, and it just shows you like the different colors. So the big data aspect of this would just be getting all this information, and then data visualization aspect would be creating this so you can kind of like see what's important and how this is actually helpful and useful to people. Machine learning. So this is one of the big parts in the futures of big data. So it focuses on AI and how it kind of teaches itself how to do stuff based off of big data and like learning all this stuff. So things about like Amazon's Alexa and stuff, it kind of teaches itself how to like listen to the person or other things. So this is one of the big things because now with the Internet of Things, like there are devices that take in information and don't even need like they're kind of programmed to like teach it stuff, which I just think is crazy. And yeah, kind of more into this. This is like one of the bigger drivers and kind of futures of big data, not just like looking at information, but just teaching technology to like teach itself. And just the last slide here. It's kind of the future of the data analytics fields. It's one of like the bigger markets in terms of growing. Like if you want to get a job, like I know that's a major here, and I just wanted to like show how it's expected to grow a lot in like recent years.